In the last video, I talked about how life was like in a medieval city, from the economic classes of people to the reality of what it was like to set foot inside the city's walls. So, from the last video you know that medieval cities were not at all the magical cities you see in fantasy stories, but something much grimier in reality. So, in this video I'll be talking about how crime and punishment was like, along with what types of entertainment people in medieval cities enjoyed. So, besides being noisy and hectic, medieval cities were often unsafe and riddled with criminals ranging from thieves and pickpockets. Rich travelers were often the victims of these criminals as they carried the most loot in their purses. Crimes were especially at its peak at night, as that was the time most merchants and travelers stayed inside and kept their doors locked, as the bandits would finally crawl out of the shadows and hunt for any poor soul wandering about in the city streets. Luckily, most cities had night watchmen patrolling the streets with candle lanterns and armed to the teeth. People accused of crimes were held in dirty, crowded jails and often starved due to the lack of food. In the early Middle Ages, trial by combat was often used to establish the accused person's guilt or innocence. In a trial, the accused would be forced to pass certain tests that were deemed impossible to pass as they were lethal, such as being thrown in a deep well only for the person to drown or be found guilty anyway if they survived as the water rejected them. There was also trial by combat where the accused had to fight to prove their innocence. Because the Middle Ages was so religious, they made sure God would protect them during the fight. If the accused were a woman, child or disabled person, they would choose a champion to fight for them. The punishments for crimes were harsh. When it came to lesser crimes, people were either fined or put in the stocks, which was humiliating to say the least, but for larger crimes such as robbery, stealing, treason or murder, the consequences were much more severe. People accused of these crimes would be hanged or burned to a stake, and the executions were carried out in public in front of large crowds. Despite the harsh environment of medieval life, there were still some positives living in a medieval city. For example, the various forms of entertainment. Board games that were popular today existed back then as well, such as chess and checkers. Children would usually be out in the streets playing with wooden swords and shields, mimicking the very soldiers that would walk past them. Townspeople would spend their time after work to celebrate special occasions such as religious feasts. These feasts, along with fair days, were the most festive events at the time. Jugglers, dancers and clowns entertained the fairgoers. Minstrels performed songs and recited poetry and played harps and other instruments. For the local people, they would be gifted by the travelling troubadours that would play them songs and tell the most insane stories. The early form of circuses were present in the Middle Ages as well, with jugglers and acrobats entertaining the villagers with their talents. Hunting was another popular activity for medieval villagers to take part in, usually hunting on horseback. The hunters would ride through the night looking for deer. At times, deer hunting became so popular that kings had to ban it to prevent all deer from being eradicated. Because of this, only nobles were permitted to hunt deer and provide to the hungry villagers if they needed food. Jousting, or medieval tournaments, which were often used for training in war, became a huge sensation of entertainment for those who wanted to see an epic battle between two knights without the violence. Over time, the concept of jousting tournaments developed. Tournaments provided the knights with the battle practice they needed while entertaining at the same time. Usually, two knights would charge each other on horseback with lances in hand. Those who were knocked off continued to fight on the ground. Knights who lost were forced to hand their horse and armor to the victor. Although tournaments were entertaining, they were also lethal. For example, in Germany, over 60 knights were killed just to entertain the crowd. Eventually, tournaments made more improvements such as heavier, more protective armor for knights to charge in. After a while, tournaments would take place in festivals, and men who participated were awarded with riches and land. Overall, medieval life varied from person to person. You could be a simple farmer working on the fields all day, or a chivalrous knight who seek glory and honor through intense training and fighting. Regardless of who you were at the time, medieval life was interesting to study nonetheless. Thank you for watching this video and supporting my love for history, and I'll see you on the next one.